who know exactly what you need to do. But something invisible continues blocking your path. Hours turn into days, days into months, and that goal, that should change your life, remains a distant ghost. While others move forward, you remain trapped in an endless cycle of preparation. What you don't realize is that it's not a lack of knowledge, resources, or luck. It's something much deeper. Mental prison so familiar that you don't even see it anymore. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how to unlock the power that already exists within you, but has been systematically sabotaged by patterns you don't even notice. This isn't just another empty promise. It's an awakening that separates those who merely dream from those who truly achieve. Because, if you don't break this pattern now, you'll continue to see your true potential slip through your fingers as life passes by every day. Millions of people wake up with the same burning desire for something more. Yet by nightfall, that fire has been extinguished not by external forces, but by something far more insidious that Napoleon Hill identified nearly a century ago. You're trapped in a prison with no visible bars. The cell door is unlocked. The path to freedom lies directly before you. Yet something keeps you firmly rooted in place, day after day, year after year. This invisible force, what Hill called the enemy within, is more powerful than any external obstacle you'll ever face. It's the true reason why 95% of people live lives of quiet desperation, watching their dreams slowly fade into the background of their daily routines. What makes this prison so dangerous is not its strength, but its invisibility. You cannot fight what you cannot see. You cannot overcome what you do not acknowledge. The first step toward freedom requires the courage to recognize that your greatest limitations aren't circumstantial, they're self-imposed. Are you ready to face this uncomfortable truth, or will you continue hiding behind excuses that feel comforting but lead nowhere? Napoleon Hill spent 25 years studying the most successful individuals of his time, titans like Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison, and Henry Ford. These weren't merely lucky individuals born into privilege. Many started with nothing. What Hill discovered was the master key that separated extraordinary achievement from mediocrity. This key isn't talent, it isn't intelligence, it isn't connections or resources or luck. The master key is something far more fundamental: the ability to direct your own mind. As Hill famously wrote, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But this isn't some wishful thinking or empty affirmation. It's a profound insight into how reality is shaped first in our thoughts before manifesting in our circumstances. Your mind is either your greatest ally or your most formidable opponent. Right now, at this very moment, it's working tirelessly, either building the pathway to your dreams or reinforcing the walls of your mental prison. There is no neutral ground. Which side is your mind working for in your life? The answer may be uncomfortable, but acknowledging it is the first step toward wielding the master key that unlocks everything else. The difference between where you are and where you want to be isn't external, it's internal. Will you continue allowing your untrained mind to rule your destiny, or are you ready to take command of the most powerful force in your universe? Hidden in the shadows of your consciousness lurks a saboteur so clever, so deceptive, that you've been unaware of its constant interference in your life. Napoleon Hill called this force the negative self-talk that runs counter to every ambition you harbor. This saboteur works through subtle whispers. You're not ready yet. People like you don't succeed at things like this. What if you fail? And everyone sees. Better to wait until the timing is perfect. These thoughts seem protective, even reasonable. That's precisely what makes them so dangerous. They don't announce themselves as sabotage. They disguise themselves as caution, as wisdom, as sin. The most successful people in history weren't free from this inner saboteur. They simply learned to recognize its voice and override it with deliberate, conscious choices. Edison heard the voice of doubt during his thousands of failed attempts at creating the light bulb. Ford heard it when experts insisted his assembly line was impossible. Hill himself heard it during the decades of criticism he endured while developing his philosophy of success. Every time you delay action on your most important goals, every time you choose comfort over growth, every time you shrink from opportunity, not wisdom speaking, it's sabotage. And until you learn to distinguish between the voice of your higher self and this lower self that fears change, you'll remain caught in an endless cycle of self-defeat, disguised as self-preservation. Which voice will you listen to today? The one that keeps you safe but small, or the one calling you toward greatness despite the discomfort? Definiteness of purpose is the starting point of all achievement, Hill declared after observing common patterns among history's greatest achievers. Yet today, most people live with vague desires rather than definite purposes. There's a world of difference between saying, "I want to be successful," and declaring, "I will increase my income to $150,000 within 18 months by creating and launching my online course that solves this specific problem for this specific audience." The first is a wish. The second is a definite purpose with sufficient clarity to direct every action toward its achievement. Without this crystallized purpose, your mind has nothing concrete to work toward. Imagine boarding a plane whose pilot announces, "We're going to fly somewhere in a generally positive direction and see where we end up." Would you stay on that flight? Yet this is precisely how most people navigate their lives, with vague intentions and no clear destination. A purpose becomes definite only when it has these elements. It must be specific. It must be written. It must have a deadline, and it must demand daily action. Anything less is merely a preference, not a purpose. And preferences don't have the power to overcome the invisible prison of self-sabotage. When Hill interviewed Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate didn't talk about merely wanting success. He described in extraordinary detail exactly what he intended to create, by when and through what means. This definiteness wasn't the result of his success. It was the cause of it. What would change in your life if you pursued your goals with this level of clarity and conviction? Are you willing to transform your preferences into purposes, or will you continue drifting, hoping that someday your destination will magically appear? You've been conditioned to believe that great achievement comes from individual effort, the lone genius, the self-made success. Napoleon Hill shattered this myth when he discovered that behind every extraordinary achievement stood not a solitary figure, but a mastermind alliance. This principle is so fundamental that Hill placed it among his most crucial discoveries. No mind is complete by itself. It needs contact and association with other minds to grow and expand. The most successful individuals don't isolate themselves. They strategically surround themselves with others who complement their weaknesses and amplify their strengths. Consider this. Edison had a team of over 20 specialists. Working with him, Ford relied on a core group of engineers and visionaries. Even Carnegie, despite his reputation for ruthlessness, attributed his success to his ability to enlist the service of people who knew more than he did. None of these titans achieved greatness alone. Yet look at how you're approaching your biggest goals. Are you trying to figure everything out yourself? Are you surrounded by people who reinforce your limitations rather than challenge them? Are you part of any mastermind alliance that combines knowledge, experience, and diverse perspectives in pursuit of a common aim. Isolation is the playground of self-sabotage. The moment you try to achieve something significant alone, you've already reduced your chances of success dramatically. The quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of your alliances. What would happen if, starting today, you began deliberately constructing a mastermind alliance focused on your definite purpose? Would you continue struggling alone? Or are you ready to harness the exponential power that comes only through strategic association? When Hill analyzed why certain people broke through barriers while others gave up at the first sign of resistance, he discovered what he called the persistence factor. This single quality often compensated for numerous deficiencies in other areas. Persistence, Hill wrote, is to the character of man as carbon is to steel. Without it, even the brightest minds and the most talented individuals eventually fade into obscurity. With it, even those of average intelligence and ability can achieve extraordinary results. Here's what most don't understand about persistence. It's not natural. It's not something you're born with. It's a decision you make moment by moment. When faced with the choice between temporary relief and long-term reward, the decision to persist when every fiber of your being screams for escape, that's what separates achievement from mere potential. Henry Ford failed and went broke 5 times before he succeeded. Thomas Edison documented 10,000 failures before creating a functioning light bulb. R.H. Macy failed in retail 7 times before his store in New York became successful. Their eventual achievements weren't the result of avoiding failure. They were the direct result of persisting through failure. Yet, in your own life, how often have you abandoned goals at the first hint of difficulty? How many projects remain half-finished? How many dreams have you shelved because the path became steeper than expected? This isn't a character flaw, it's a trained response. And what has been trained can be untrained and replaced with something stronger. Persistence isn't about never falling. It's about getting up one more time than you fall. Are you willing to develop this steel in your character, or will you continue surrendering at the first sign of resistance, watching your potential dissolve into a lifetime of what could have been? One of Napoleon Hill's most profound, yet least understood principles deals with the transmutation of energy, particularly sexual energy, to creative achievement. This isn't about suppression, but conscious redirection. Every form of human energy seeks expression. When these energies aren't channeled constructively, they don't simply disappear, they manifest destructively. The same force that can drive creative genius can, when misdirected, fuel self-sabotage, addiction, and aimless activity. Hill observed that history's most accomplished individuals were those who learned to harness and redirect their primal energies toward their definite purpose. This isn't coincidental. The most powerful creative force in human nature is also the most dangerous when left indirected. Look at where your energy flows in an average day. How much goes toward consumption rather than creation? How much is scattered across trivial distractions rather than concentrated on meaningful achievement? This isn't about morality, it's about power. Every unit of energy you disperse is unavailable for your highest priorities. The ability to transmute energy, to redirect it from lower purposes to higher ones, isn't merely a useful skill. It's essential for anyone who aspires to extraordinary achievement. Without this mastery, you'll continue experiencing the frustration of having desire without direction, ambition without achievement, potential without performance. Energy flows where attention goes. Where is yours flowing right now? Are you ready to reclaim these scattered forces and focus them with laser precision on your definite purpose? Or will you continue allowing your greatest power to dissipate through paths of least resistance? Beneath your conscious awareness runs a tireless system, your subconscious mind, that controls approximately 95% of your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Napoleon Hill recognized that this hidden mind, not your conscious intentions, ultimately determines your results. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what's helpful and what's harmful. It simply executes whatever programming it receives through repeated thoughts, emotions, and experiences. This is why people can consciously want success while subconsciously sabotaging every step toward it. The programming runs deeper than intention. This subconscious conditioning wasn't installed randomly. From early childhood, you absorbed messages about what you deserve, what's possible for someone like you, and what happens when you pursue your desires. These weren't conscious choices, they were impressions burned into your psychological operating system through repetition and emotional intensity. The breakthrough comes when you realize this programming can be deliberately rewritten through what Hill called autosuggestion, the repeated exposure of your subconscious to specific thoughts and images. You can gradually replace limiting beliefs with empowering ones. This isn't quick or easy, but it's the only way to create lasting change rather than temporary motivation. Consider how many times you've been temporarily inspired, only to revert to old patterns within days or weeks. That wasn't a failure of willpower. It was the inevitable reassertion of subconscious programming that hadn't been changed at its root. Until you address this deeper coding, you'll remain trapped in cycles of temporary progress, followed by mysterious setbacks. Are you ready to do the deeper work of reprogramming your subconscious mind, or will you continue trying to build new results on old foundations that can't possibly support them? Knowledge alone isn't power, it's potential power. Napoleon Hill discovered that information only becomes transformative when coupled with emotional energy. He called this critical combination emotional alchemy, the process of transforming mere facts into burning desire. Consider how many books you've read, courses you've taken, and seminars you've attended without implementing what you learned. This wasn't a failure of information, it was a failure of emotional integration. Without sufficient emotional charge, even the most valuable knowledge remains intellectual entertainment rather than transformative wisdom. The most successful individuals aren't necessarily those who know the most. They're those who feel the most strongly about what they know. Their knowledge is emotionally charged, creating an internal pressure that demands expression through action. Edison wasn't just intellectually interested in invention, he was consumed by it. Ford wasn't merely fascinated by production, he was obsessed with it. This emotional intensity isn't something you either have or don't have. It's something you deliberately cultivate by connecting your goals to your deepest values and most powerful motivators. When your objectives are tied to what matters most to you, action becomes nearly automatic. When they remain disconnected from emotional significance, even simple steps require enormous willpower. Look at the goals you've struggled to achieve. The problem isn't that you don't know enough or that you lack ability. The problem is that you haven't sufficiently connected those goals to emotional forces powerful enough to overcome inertia and resistance. Intellect proposes, but emotion disposes. Which of your knowledge needs to be transformed through emotional alchemy, from interesting concept to burning necessity? After studying achievement for 25 years, Napoleon Hill concluded that knowledge, planning, and necessary don't produce results. Only action does. Yet this is precisely where most people remain paralyzed. Caught in an endless cycle of preparation without performance, Hill identified a pattern among those who consistently translated intentions into results. They followed what might be called a decisive action protocol, a systematic approach to moving from thought to action without the usual delays of overthinking, second-guessing, and perfectionism. This protocol begins with making decisions quickly and changing them slowly, if at all. Most people do the opposite. They delay decisions indefinitely, but abandon them at the first sign of difficulty. Decisive individuals reverse this pattern. They understand that an imperfect action taken today is infinitely more valuable than a perfect plan never executed. The second element involves starting before you feel ready. Readiness is a myth perpetuated by fear, disguised as preparation. The most successful people in history didn't wait until they felt prepared. They began with whatever they had, wherever they were, and allowed the path to reveal itself through action rather than anticipation. Finally, the protocol demands daily, consistent action toward your definite purpose. Regardless of mood, circumstance, or immediate results, this rhythmic persistence creates momentum that eventually overcomes even the most formidable obstacles. As Hill observed, effort only fully releases its reward after a person refuses to quit. Every moment of hesitation between conceiving an action and executing it creates space for self-sabotage to enter. How many ideas have died in that gap between intention and implementation in your life? Are you ready to close that gap through decisive action, or will you continue allowing your potential to evaporate in the space between knowing and doing? You've reached a decisive moment. Everything you've read until now remains mere information, unless translated into immediate action. Napoleon Hill warned about this critical juncture. Knowledge is only potential power. It becomes power only when, and if, it is organized into definite plans of action. The principles you've encountered aren't new. They've existed for centuries, even millennia. What's new is the possibility that today, right now, you might finally apply them, rather than merely understanding them. This isn't about discovering something novel. It's about doing something different with what you already know. The truth is that there are only two paths from this point forward. The first leads back to familiar territory: comfort, certainty, and the quiet desperation of unrealized potential. It's the path of least resistance, requiring nothing from you but surrender to the patterns that have shaped your results until now. The second path leads into unfamiliar growth, uncertainty, and the exhilaration of becoming the person you're capable of being. This path demands everything from you: your focus, your persistence, your willingness to fail and rise again. It requires you to release the person you've been to become the person you're meant to be. No one can choose your path but you, not your circumstances, not your past, not your limitations, only you. This choice isn't made once, but moment by moment, decision by decision, action by action. What will you choose in this moment? Will you close this message and continue as before, or will you take the first decisive step toward the life you know awaits you? The difference between where you are and where you could be isn't knowledge, it's decision. And that decision stands before you now, awaiting your response. Napoleon Hill discovered that successful individuals don't just make occasional good decisions, they make a fundamental commitment that precedes and powers all other choices. He called this burning the bridges behind you, removing any possibility of retreat. This level of commitment terrifies most people. They prefer keeping options open, maintaining escape routes, preserving the possibility of retreat. But this safety-seeking behavior is precisely what guarantees mediocrity. As Hill observed, great achievement has no roadmap. It demands risk-taking, leaving safe paths for new ground. Consider this truth. Every significant achievement in history came from people who committed beyond the point of reason. They didn't merely try. They committed to outcomes with such totality that failure became nothing more than a temporary condition on the path to inevitable success. When Ford declared he would create a V8 engine, despite his engineers insisting it was impossible, he wasn't expressing a preference, he was making an unyielding commitment. When Edison continued after thousands of failed attempts, he wasn't being stubborn. He was honoring a commitment beyond rational calculation. What have you truly committed to in your life? Not what you've wished for, hoped for, or tried. What you've committed to with such totality that retreat isn't an option. The brutal truth is that, until you make commitments of this magnitude, you'll continue living below your capabilities, explaining away your unfulfilled potential with stories about circumstances, timing, and luck. The moment of commitment isn't when things are easy, it's precisely when continuing seems unreasonable, when evidence suggests retreat, when everyone around you questions your sanity. That's when commitment reveals its power. Are you ready to make commitments of this nature, or will you continue dabbling, sampling, and experimenting, always maintaining the safety net that ensures you'll never fall too far, but also never fly too high? Fear isn't the enemy of achievement, it's the fuel. When properly understood and redirected, Napoleon Hill's research revealed that what separates extraordinary individuals isn't an absence of fear, but a different relationship with it. Most people misunderstand fear's purpose. They see it as a signal to retreat, a warning to avoid discomfort. But fear's evolutionary function isn't to prevent action. It's to sharpen focus and mobilize energy for effective response. The problem isn't fear itself, but the habitual reaction of avoidance it triggers. The most successful individuals develop what Hill called fear transmutation, the ability to channel fear's energy into heightened performance rather than paralysis. They recognize that fear and excitement create nearly identical physiological responses. The difference lies not in the sensation, but in the interpretation. When you feel fear before an important presentation, a difficult conversation, or a new venture, that's not a malfunction, it's your system mobilizing resources for peak performance. The racing heart, the heightened awareness, the surge of energy, these aren't obstacles to success, but prerequisites for it. When properly directed, this transmutation begins with a simple but profound shift. Stop asking, "How can I get rid of this fear?" and start asking, "How can I use this energy?" The first question leads to avoidance and reduction. The second leads to engagement and amplification. One diminishes you, the other expands you. Every time you avoid a fear-inducing situation, you train your brain to see fear as intolerable rather than useful. Each retreat reinforces the prison of comfort that keeps your potential locked away. What would become possible if, starting today, you began interpreting fear as a resource rather than a restriction? Are you willing to transmute this primal energy into forward motion, or will you continue allowing it to hold you in place, safely distanced from your greatest possibilities? Perhaps nothing has sabotaged more potential than the misunderstanding of failure's role in achievement. Napoleon Hill discovered that history's most successful individuals didn't avoid failure, they pursued it, understanding its irreplaceable function in growth. Most people organize their lives around minimizing failure. They choose safe options, remain in comfort zones, and avoid risks that might expose their limitations. This safety-seeking behavior feels rational, but guarantees stagnation. Growth and comfort cannot coexist. What Hill observed in exceptional achievers was a fundamental reframe. Failure isn't the opposite of success, it's an essential component of it. Edison's 10,000 unsuccessful attempts weren't 10,000 failures, they were 10,000 discoveries of approaches that wouldn't work, each one necessary for eventual breakthrough. When asked about these failures, Edison responded, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This perspective transforms failure from something to avoid into something to embrace, even pursue. When you understand that mastery in any domain requires moving through incompetence, discomfort, and repeated disappointment, these experiences lose their power to deter you. They become expected milestones rather than unexpected roadblocks. The most dangerous failure isn't the stumble that teaches, it's the opportunity never attempted. As Hill noted, the majority of men meet with failure because of their lack of persistence in creating new plans to take the place of those which fail. Every master was once a disaster. Every expert was once a beginner. The only difference is that they persisted through the inevitable failures that stopped others. What failures have you been avoiding that contain the very lessons necessary for your growth? What attempts have you abandoned prematurely because results didn't come quickly enough? Are you ready to embrace failure as feedback rather than finality? Or will you continue playing so safely that you guarantee the ultimate failure and realized potential? Motivation fluctuates. Inspiration comes and goes. But Napoleon Hill discovered that those who create extraordinary results rely on something far more dependable: disciplined daily routine. He called this the habit of doing more than paid for. And it's perhaps the least glamorous but most essential element of lasting success. Most people operate reactively, responding to demands and desires as they arise. This reactive approach feels natural but surrenders control of your most precious resource, your attention, to external forces. In contrast, those who achieve at the highest levels operate proactively through systems of daily discipline that maintain progress regardless of mood or circumstance. These systems aren't complex, but they're non-negotiable. They typically include beginning each day with focused planning rather than immediate reactivizing time for high-value activities before lower priorities. Consume available energy, regular review of definite purpose and written goals, learning that expands capabilities in key areas, physical activity that maintains the energy needed for sustained performance, reflecti that converts experience into insight. Gap between knowing these practices and implementing them daily represents the exact distance between your current results and your potential. Information without implementation creates knowledge debt. The accumulating gap between what you know and what you do. What makes daily discipline so challenging isn't its complexity but its simplicity. There's nowhere to hide, no clever strategy to substitute for consistent action. As Hill wrote, "You are the master of your destiny. You can influence, direct, and control your own environment. You can make your life what you want it to be." Are you ready to establish the daily disciplines that guarantee progress toward your highest priorities? Or will you continue allowing each day to unfold according to the agenda of everything and everyone except your deepest purpose? During the Great Depression, when most saw only scarcity and limitation, Napoleon Hill made a counterintuitive observation. Within every adversity lies the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. This wasn't positive thinking, it was strategic perception. Based on historical pattern recognition, the truth Hill discovered is that opportunities rarely announce themselves. They typically arrive disguised as problems, challenges, and disruptions to the status quo. This disguise is actually their protection, ensuring that only those with trained perception will recognize and seize them while others are busy complaining, avoiding, or waiting for better circumstances. Consider that Uber was born during the 2008 financial crisis. Disney was launched during the Great Depression. Microsoft was founded during the oil embargo recession of the 1970s. These weren't coincidences. Difficult conditions reveal opportunities invisible during prosperity, but only to those trained to perceive differently. This principle operates not just in economics, but in personal development. The situations you find most challenging, the conflicts, setbacks, and disappointments that seem to block your progress contain within them the exact lessons and redirections necessary for your growth. But these benefits remain hidden until you deliberately search for them. As Hill wrote, "Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit." This isn't magical thinking, it's a testable hypothesis. When you approach difficulties with the question, "Where is the opportunity in this?" rather than "Why is this happening to me?" you activate pattern recognition capabilities that remain dormant in reactive, victim-oriented thinking. What challenge are you currently facing that might contain hidden opportunity? What problem might actually be the doorway to your next level of growth? Are you willing to train your perception to find advantages where others see only obstacles? Or will you continue allowing circumstances to determine your possibilities? Beyond logical analysis and strategic planning lies another faculty that Napoleon Hill found consistently present in extraordinary achievers: intuition. He called it infinite intelligence, the ability to receive insights and guidance beyond conscious reasoning. Modern science confirms what Hill observed. Your brain processes approximately 11 million bits of information per second, but your conscious mind can handle only about 50 bits. This means 99.9995% of information processing happens beneath awareness. When intuitive insights arise, you're not receiving random impressions. You're accessing this vast subconscious processing. Most people have been trained to dismiss intuitive signals in favor of logical analysis. This dismissal makes sense in simple, data-rich environments where cause and effect are clear. But in complex, ambiguous situations, precisely the kind that contain the greatest opportunities, into which intuition often perceives patterns and possibilities invisible to conscious analysis. The most innovative breakthroughs in history came not through incremental logic, but through intuitive leaps. Einstein visualized riding on a beam of light before developing relativity theory. Beethoven composed his greatest works after losing his hearing. Tesla saw his alternating current motor in a vision while walking in a park. These weren't mystical experiences, they were intuitive integrations of subconscious processing. Developing this faculty requires quieting the constant mental chatter that drowns subtler signals. As Hill advised, your mind becomes creative when you control it, and become quiet enough to hear your intuitive thoughts. This happens through practices that temporarily suspend analytical thinking: meditation, time in nature, artistic expression, or simply periods of undistracted silence. How often do you create space for intuitive insights to emerge? When was the last time you made a decision based not just on analysis, but on that deeper knowing that defies immediate explanation? Are you ready to develop this neglected faculty that might contain your greatest creative breakthroughs, or will you continue relying exclusively on the conscious mind that sees only the surface of possibility? After studying achievement for decades, Napoleon Hill made a surprising discovery. Gratitude wasn't merely a pleasant emotion or ethical virtue. It was a practical amplifier of creative power. He called it the fertilizer that accelerates the action of the law of attraction. Most people view gratitude as something to be experienced after success, a response to favorable outcomes. But Hill observed that exceptional achievers reversed this sequence. They actively cultivated gratitude before and during the achievement process, not just afterward. This wasn't sentimentality. It was strategy. The neurochemistry explains why. Gratitude activates the brain's reward pathways and production of dopamine and serotonin, the exact chemistry needed for motivation, creative problem solving, and resilience. When you deliberately generate gratitude, you're not just feeling good, you're creating the optimal brain state for achievement. Beyond biochemistry, gratitude fundamentally shifts perception. The brain can't simultaneously focus on appreciation and limitation. When you direct attention to what's working, what's available, and what's possible, you literally see opportunities invisible to the problem-focused mind. As Hill noted, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent benefit. But only gratitude allows you to perceive that seed. This principle is testable through a simple practice. For 1 week, begin each day by writing 5 specific things you're grateful for regarding your current situation, especially aspects of challenges you're facing. Don't evaluate this practice by how it makes you feel, but by what it helps you notice, the subtle shifts in perception, the emerging possibilities, the creative solutions that weren't visible through the lens of lack or limitation. Are you using gratitude strategically to amplify your creative capabilities, or have you relegated it to an occasional emotional response when circumstances happen to please you? The difference might seem subtle, but it separates those who respond to life from those who create it. You've reached what Napoleon Hill called the moment of decision, the point where information must convert to action or become merely intellectual entertainment. Everything you've read becomes either a turning point or another temporary interruption, depending on what happens next. Most people treat insights as interesting rather than actionable. They collect knowledge without implementation, mistaking understanding for progress. As Hill observed after studying thousands of lives, knowledge is not power. It is only potential power. It becomes power only when and if it is organized into definite plans of action. The uncomfortable truth is that transformation doesn't begin with understanding, it begins with doing. Not when circumstances are ideal. Not when you feel completely ready. Not when the path is entirely clear. But now, in the messy middle of your actual life, with all its limitations and complications. This decisive moment isn't about making the perfect choice. It's about making any constructive choice that moves you from passive consumption to active creation. The direction of that first step matters less than the fact of movement itself. As Hill wrote, "Do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand, and work with whatever tools you may have at your command, and better tools will be found as you go along." The most dangerous decision is the decision to wait for better conditions, greater certainty, or stronger motivation. These aren't prerequisites for action, they're byproducts of it. Clarity comes through movement, not before it. Motivation follows action, not the reverse. What one step will you take in the next 24 hours to move toward your most important goal? Not what you'll plan or consider or research what you'll do. This isn't about magnitude, but direction. Small actions consistently taken create momentum that eventually overcomes even the most formidable resistance. The moment of decision has arrived. Will you break the pattern of understanding without implementation, or will this be yet another concept that enlightens without transforming. The answer won't be found in your intentions, but in your next action. At the core of Napoleon Hill's philosophy lies a principle so fundamental that without it, all other strategies and techniques ultimately fail. He called it faith, not in the religious sense, but as unwavering belief in your ability to transform intention into reality, regardless of temporary conditions. This isn't positive thinking or wishful optimism. It's a cultivated mental state based on understanding how achievement actually works. As Hill wrote, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve, but the believing must precede the achieving, often in the complete absence of evidence. Consider any extraordinary achievement. At its inception, there was no external evidence it could succeed. The light bulb, the airplane, the personal computer all existed first as beliefs sustained despite overwhelming contrary evidence. The belief didn't respond to reality. It created it. Most people have the sequence backward. They're willing to believe once they see evidence. But evidence never precedes belief in the creation of anything new. Evidence follows belief expressed through persistent action. As Hill observed, faith removes limitations. This unshakable belief isn't inherited or bestowed, it's deliberately cultivated through specific practices, the daily review of your definite purpose, surrounding yourself with evidence of possibility, controlling your mental environment, and perhaps most importantly, acting as if your desired outcome were already realized. When you act in alignment with this absolute belief, making decisions, taking risks, and persisting through setbacks as if success were inevitable, you activate what Hill called infinite intelligence, the universal tendency of creative solutions to emerge in response to clearly defined intentions backed by unwavering belief. The gap between where you are and where you want to be exists first in belief, before it exists in reality. Close that gap in your mind through unshakable faith in the outcome, and yourself and external circumstances will eventually conform to that inner pattern. Not through magic, but through the natural expression of thought into form, through persistent, belief-driven action. Are you willing to believe completely in your ability to achieve your definite purpose? Not after you see evidence, but before, when all apparent facts argue against possibility. This faith isn't blind. It's the prerequisite for vision. Without it, all other success principles remain mere concepts rather than transformative forces in your life. Napoleon Hill's research led him to a conclusion both liberating and terrifying. You are the master of your destiny. You can influence, direct, and control your own environment. You can make your life what you want it to be. This statement contains what might be called the ultimate ultimatum. The absolute responsibility for your life rests with you, not partially, not mostly, completely. This isn't a theory or philosophy. It's a fundamental law of achievement that operated long before it was discovered and continues operating whether acknowledged or not. Most people find absolute responsibility uncomfortable. They prefer explanations that place at least some causality outside themselves: economic conditions, upbringing, genetics, timing, luck, or the actions of others. These explanations feel valid because they contain partial truths. External factors do influence circumstances, but they never determine outcomes for those who understand this principle. The moment you accept complete responsibility for everything in your life, past, present, and future, you move from victim to creator. As Hill wrote, "The man who does more than he is paid for will soon be paid for more than he does." This isn't about blame for past conditions, but power over future ones. It's not about fault, but function, recognizing that regardless of how circumstances arose, Only you control your response to them. This responsibility extends beyond actions to thoughts themselves. You are the master of your destiny. You can influence, direct, and control your own environment, Hill insisted. This mastery begins not with controlling external conditions, but with commanding your own mind, the thoughts you entertain, the emotions you cultivate, the interpretations you assign to events. What makes this ultimatum both liberating and terrifying is its absoluteness. There's nowhere to hide, no one else to blame, nothing to wait for. With responsibility comes power, but with power comes accountability. Are you willing to accept complete responsibility for everything in your life from this moment forward? Not theoretically, not philosophically, but practically in your daily choices, your habitual thoughts, your consistent actions. Your answer to this question, not in words, but in lived commitment, will determine whether the principles you've encountered become transformative forces or merely interesting concepts. As Hill concluded, after 25 years of studying achievement, life reflects your own thoughts back to you. What reflection are you creating? Napoleon Hill didn't just identify principles of achievement, he developed a specific formula for activating them in daily life. This formula transforms abstract understanding into concrete results through systematic implementation. The activation formula consists of 5 sequential steps. Definite purpose. Crystallize your dominant desire into a specific, measurable objective with a deadline. Write it down and read it aloud twice daily upon waking and before sleeping, with the emotion of already having achieved it. Mastermind alliance. Form a group of at least 2 others who support your purpose and offer complementary knowledge, skills, or resources. Meet regularly with absolute candor about challenges and progress. Persistent action plan. Develop specific, scheduled actions to be taken regardless of conditions or feelings. These aren't intentions, but commitments. Appointments with yourself that take priority over comfort and convenience. Transmutation. Practice. Establish daily habits that redirect mental and emotional energy from lower purposes. Worry, criticism, comparison to higher ones, creation, contribution, growth. This includes at least 30 minutes of daily reading that expands your knowledge in areas relevant to your purpose. Resilience protocol. Prepare in advance your specific response to setbacks, resistance, and failure. Decide now before challenges arise exactly how you'll interpret and respond to obstacles, transforming them from stopping points to stepping stones. This formula must be implemented as a complete system. As Hill observed, no one element of success is sufficient unto itself. Definiteness without action creates dreamers. Action without purpose creates exhaustion. Purpose and action without resilience creates early abandonment. The power lies not just in knowing these steps, but in integrating them into daily routine, until they become automatic part of your operating system rather than occasional practices. What separates achievement from aspiration isn't understanding the formula, but living it with such consistency that it becomes your default rather than your exception. Are you willing to implement this complete system, rather than cherry-pick the elements that feel comfortable or convenient? Are you ready to graduate from knowing principles to living them with such consistency that they become not what you do, but who you are? You stand now at a decisive crossroads. The path behind you is known, comfortable in its familiarity, yet ultimately unsatisfying in its limitations. The path ahead remains uncharted, challenging in its uncertainty, yet limitless in its possibilities. Napoleon Hill observed that this crossroads appears multiple times throughout life. offering repeated opportunities to choose growth over comfort, creation over consumption, mastery over mediocrity. But each time it appears, the stakes grow higher as potential gradually hardens into permanent limitation through habitual choice. The most dangerous decision at this crossroads isn't choosing the wrong path, it's making no decision at all. Indecision is not postponement but surrender, not patience but fear disguised as prudence. As Hill wrote, procrastination is the bad habit of putting off until the day after tomorrow what should have been done the day before yesterday. The truth you must confront is that transformation never happens in the future. It happens only in the present, through decisions made and actions taken in real time. The person you become doesn't arrive through eventual circumstance, but through immediate choice. Consider carefully what awaits down each path from this crossroads. One leads to the slow death of potential, the gradual surrender of possibility through daily compromise, the accumulating regret of roads not taken, the quiet desperation of knowing you settled for less than you were capable of becoming. Other leads to the progressive realization of your highest self, the exhilaration of growing beyond perceived limitations, the satisfaction of creating rather than merely consuming, the profound fulfillment that comes not from avoiding difficulty, but from overcoming it. This choice, between comfort and growth, between the known and the possible, defines not just careers or achievements, but lives. As Hill concluded after studying thousands of lives, the starting point of all achievement is desire. Keep this constantly in mind. Weak desire brings weak results, just as a small fire makes a small amount of heat. How strong is your desire? Not your wish, not your hope, not your interest, but your absolute, non-negotiable commitment to becoming everything you're capable of being. Your answer, demonstrated through immediate action rather than eventual intention, will determine everything that follows from this moment forward. The crossroads stands before you now. The choice is yours. What will you decide?